The car almost hit her, and Natalie stared at it with a dull expression, her face pale. The front bumper was barely a few inches from her knee, and if the driver hadn't stopped in time, she would have been sent flying by the impact. "You crazy?" the driver yelled angrily as he climbed out of the car. It wasn't that she had meant to harm herself. She had simply rushed out in a moment of desperation, caring about nothing but stopping the car. She swallowed slowly, still a little frightened, but she forced a smile and apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose, I just..." Her voice trailed off, and she looked into the back of the car, but she couldn't make out Bryce's face through the heavily tinted windows. Looking back at the driver, she said, "I want to talk to Bryce Clare." "You're looking for Mr. Clare?" The driver frowned awkwardly. "Yes, would you mind telling him that I need to speak with him?" Natalie looked at him plaintively. "This is highly irregular. I can't just..." the driver began. He was in a difficult situation. He knew his boss's temperament, and that it was unlikely he would want to meet this woman, but his heart softened when he thought of her desperate and reckless behavior. "Wait a moment, let me ask." Natalie immediately broke into a wide smile. "Thank you." The driver glanced at her, and then turned around and walked to the rear door. The window slowly lowered, revealing Bryce's handsome face. "What's going on?" he asked curtly, with more than a hint of displeasure in his deep voice. The driver respectfully lowered his head. "This lady says she wants to talk to you." Bryce's eyelid twitched, and he looked through the windscreen at Natalie, who was still standing in front of the car. He frowned slightly and lowered his head to look at his watch. A client was waiting to see him. He didn't have time to talk to her. "Tell her I'm busy," he said, and the window slowly rose. The driver returned to Natalie and passed on Bryce's message. "I'm sorry, Mr. Clare is busy." And he then climbed back into the front seat. "Busy?" Natalie thought with a frown. "No, I must talk to him. Who else can save my son?" The sound of the car starting rang in her ears. Without thinking, she blocked it again, shouting to the man inside, "Mr. Clare, please give me just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. I'll leave right afterwards, I promise." "Mr. Clare, what should we do?" asked the driver. Bryce glared at the woman blocking the car's path, and a hint of annoyance surfaced in his eyes. She was truly a difficult woman. Noticing that he was upset, the driver quickly said, "Don't worry, sir, I'll get rid of her." But just as he was about to open the door, a low voice came from behind him. "It's all right. Let her in." Bryce narrowed his eyes at Natalie. He was curious to know what she was really up to. The driver was surprised that Bryce had changed his mind, but he quickly got out of the car to relay the message. When Natalie heard his words, she looked up and met Bryce's deep gaze. Her heart skipped a beat as she lowered her head and quickly got into the car. The moment she was sat inside, she started talking. "Mr. Clare, I need your help. My dad has taken my son Liam. I don't know where he is, and I need your help to get him back." Bryce raised his eyebrows. She really is impertinent, asking for my help the moment she opens her mouth. He thought, annoyed. "Why should I?" he replied disdainfully. "I only helped her out before for the sake of the child. Does she really think I'll help her out again? Who does she think she is?" he thought. Natalie was lost for words, not knowing how to respond. She knew her request was unreasonable, but she was at her wit's end. That was the only reason she had asked for his help. She would never have approached him if she had a choice. As she thought of this and realized she had no option, she summoned the courage to plead with him. "Mr. Clare, I beg of you, please help me. If you help me..." She paused, lowered her head, and then continued quietly. "If you help me, I'll give you anything." "Anything?" Bryce glanced at her and smiled sarcastically. "What do you have that I could possibly want? What do you mean?" He began, and then moved closer to her, causing her to shrink back in fear. His voice was full of contempt as he whispered, "Will you sleep with me?" Instantly, Natalie's face turned red, and she bit so hard on her lip that she almost drew blood. When she didn't reply, Bryce scoffed. He sat up straight, adjusted the cuffs of his shirt with his slender fingers, and said coldly, "Unfortunately for you, I have many women, I can't even count how many, begging me to sleep with them every day." Natalie looked up, surprised. She knew he was very popular with women, but she was still surprised to hear the words from his own mouth. At that moment, she realized she hadn't thought her plan through properly. Embarrassment welled up inside her. Even if she wanted to repay him with her body, he still might not want it. And as he said himself, he wasn't short of women, so she would have to think of another incentive. Natalie smiled bitterly to herself. She suddenly realized that asking him for help like this was probably one of the most stupid things she had ever done. She had come here only to be humiliated. She took a deep breath and forced a smile. "I'm sorry, Mr. Clare. Sorry to bother you." With that, she hurriedly opened the car door and got out. Now that she was outside in the sun, she felt dizzy again, and she squinted in the sunlight. Bryce turned, and his calm gaze landed on her. In the sunlight, her face was very pale, as white as a sheet, and she looked especially frail and beautiful. Something stirred inside him briefly, but he ignored it, instead looking away and ordering the driver to go. Natalie watched Bryce's car leave. Even though the sun shone brightly, she couldn't suppress the chill that crept slowly down her spine. If Bryce Clare isn't willing to help me, who else can I ask? She thought. She hugged her arms and stood there, looking blankly ahead. After a while, she shook her head and hailed a taxi to take her back to her grandmother's house. She had only just returned home, and she didn't have any friends and was entirely on her own. No one could help her. Her father was determined to use her and her son to get a partnership with the Clare family. How can he call himself a good father? She thought, feeling both anger and resentment. But she narrowed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly in determination. No matter what, she had to get Liam back. If something were to happen to him while he was in the care of her family, she would never forgive them.
Don't let your excitement die! The full audio series is on the Pocket FM app. Tap the link in the description to install now.